Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamutirayet. We finished the Vyadha Gita in our prior class. We continue today with a sequence of 3 chapters, which is a story of the Rishi Mudgala and a very odd fellow, Durvasa. Now, Mudgala is not a really well-known Rishi. He comes someplace in the Rig Veda. There are perhaps 1 or more hymns attributed to Mudgala in the Rig Veda, and an odd story also. But elsewhere in the literature, he doesn't play a very prominent role. In fact, the most prominent place we see anything about the Rishi Mudgala is right here in these chapters. So this section of Mahabharata is kind of the famous story about the sage Mudgala. Also the Rishi Durvasa. Many of you have heard stories about Durvasa, and we'll see some details about all of that as we proceed, about Durvasa in particular. Mudgala will let the story unfold, and we'll learn about Mudgala, and we're going to see what's prominent in this sequence of 3 chapters are teachings about tapas, spiritual austerity, and dana, the practice of charity. And you're going to see a connection between tapas and dana that perhaps you've never seen before. I've never seen it in any other text. It comes out very nicely here. I'll remind you that if you're interested, you can print out these handouts from our website. And with that very brief introduction, we'll begin. We begin with the story. We'll go through the story part fairly quickly, and then we'll slow down when we get to the Vedantic teachings. So first we have remember the story within the story within the story. So this is the middle story where Vaishampayana, who was the disciple of Vyasa, is narrating all of this to King Janamejaya. That's like the middle story. Vaishampayana vacha, Vaishampayana vane navasatam tesham, vane navasatam pandavana mahatmanam pandava. Varshan yekadashati yuhu, Varshan yekadashati Kritchena bharatarshava, Kritchrena bharat Tesham pandavanam, Tesham, for them, for who? Pandavanam, for those Pandavas who are Mahatmanam, those great-souled Pandavas, those great people Pandavas, who are Nivasatam, who are dwelling where? We're still in the Aranyaka Parva, so they're dwelling in the Aranya, in the vane, in the forest. They've been living there in the forest for how long? Varshani, for years. How many years? Ekadasha, for 11 years. Remember the story? What was after losing the 3rd dice game? They were exiled for how many years? 12. Plus 1 more year of Ajnatavasa, being incognito. So they finished 11 of their 12 years living in the forest. By the way, just looking back, the Aranyaka Parva has 299 chapters. This is chapter 245. So that's why 11 years have elapsed. The Aranyaka Parva being, I think, the 2nd longest Parva out of the 18 books of the Mahabharata, because they spend 12 years in the forest. So 11 of those 12 years have been spent. Iyuhu, they spent those 11 years in the forest, but not happily. Kritchrena, in misery, in severe difficulty. They spent those 11 years. Bharatarshava, the Rishi Vaishampayana addresses King Janamejaya, O great king, Bharatarshava, the Pandavas have been in the forest 11 years, suffering in misery. Then what happened? Kasya chit tvata kalasya, kasya chit tvata vyasa satyavati sutaha ajagama mahayogi ajagama pandavanavalokaha pandavanav kasya chit tu Atta. You have to break those words apart. Atta. Then, too. On the other hand, kasyachit kalasya, at some time after they had spent 11 years in the forest, what happened? Vyasa, a character in his own story, right? He's the author of the story. He is also one of the characters of the story. So Vyasa, who is Satyavati Sutaha, the son of Satyavati. Ajagama, that Mahayogi, that great yogi, Ajagama, he came. He came where? Pandavan Avalokakaha. He came to the Pandavas, Avalokakaha, to see them. He came to see, he came to meet the Pandavas, and Tanaveksha Krishan Pautran, Tanaveksha Krishan Vane Vanyena Jivataha, Vane Vanyena Maharsharanukam Maharsharanukam Abravid Bashpagadgadam. Excuse me. All right. Tan aveksha, having seen. Vyasa, having seen tan, them, having seen those Pandavas who are krishan, thin, not thin, emaciated. Why are they emaciated? Because they are jivataha, they are living vane vanyena. They're living vane, in the forest. Vanyena means living on the products of the forest. Vanya are the products of the forest. So if you go into a forest, what will you eat? Be serious now. If you go into right behind the ashram, there's 3,000 acres of forest. I challenge you, walk out the door, walk out there and look for something to eat. What will you eat? Not... That's the problem. I mean, we say, oh, you live on the roots and fruits of the forest, as if it's in such abundance and you can put on some weight. Get real. It's a life of terrible deprivation. They lived a very, very difficult life. And as a result, Tan Krishan Aveksha, that when Vyasa came after 11 years of living on what they could find in the forest, they were krishan, they were emaciated. One more descriptive word here, they were pautran. Vyasa saw those mated Pandavas who were pautran. Pautra, most of you know, means grandchildren. Remember, they were Vyasa's grandchildren. Remember, the story is so complicated. Remember that Vyasa gave children to Ambalika, Ambalika, and the maid. And Ambalika was the father of Pandu. So since Ambalika was the father of Pandu, then the Pandavas are sons of Pandu. So in that way, Vyasa was grandfather to the Pandavas, also grandfather to the Kauravas. Both. He was grandfather to both. Okay. So, having seen them in the forest, emaciated, having seen his own grandchildren. Think about a grandfather seeing his grandchildren emaciated. But Vyasa is no ordinary grandfather. Imagine if your grandfather dressed in bark and had long hair and a long beard and was a great rishi. Not like any ordinary grandfather. Vyasa is no ordinary grandfather. Look at, and you will see that when you will see his response. On the other hand, he is grandfather. So that Maharshihi, that great sage, Vyasa, anukampartam, he was filled with compassion. And filled with compassion, anukampartam, out of compassion, abravit, he spoke to the Pandavas, but he had some difficulty in speaking because he was bashpa, yeah, that's just simply bashpa gadgadam. Bashpa is tears. Actually, literally, it's just funny. The first definition of bashpa is actually mist or steam. So when your eyes get misty, this is the idea, bashpa. Gadgadam is when your throat gets a catch. So his throat is gadgadam. His throat is caught up because of bashpa, because of tears. His throat is choked with tears, and abravit, he said, Vyasa vacha, Vyasa, Yudhishthira mahabaho, Yudhishthira, Shrinu dharma bhratam vara, Shrinu dharma, Na tapta tapasa putra, Na tapta tapasa, Prapnuvanti mahat sukham, prapnuvanti mahat. Yudhishthira, Mahabaho, O Yudhishthira, Mahabaho, O mighty one. Dharma Bratam Vara, Vara, O, it's a term of address. O best, best of whom? Best among the Dharma Brit, best among the supporters of Dharma. O Yudhishthira, O mighty armed Yudhishthira, O Dharma Bratam Vara, O best amongst the followers of Dharma, foremost of the virtuous, that's good. Shrinu, listen. And now comes grandfather's instruction. So grandfather is choked with tears, but grandfather is not, his grandchildren are not little children. His grandchildren are mighty warriors and followers of Dharma. So he has to give them appropriate advice. He's addressing specifically Yudhishthira, but he's really addressing all of them. But specifically to Yudhishthira, he says, Putra, O son, na atapta tapasaha prapnuvanti mahat sukham. Na prapnuvanti mahat sukham. Mahat sukham, great happiness. Na prapnuvanti, one does not obtain. One does not obtain great happiness. Who? Atapta tapasaha. Nice expression. Tapas, as austerity. Atapta means not, means austerity which is not done. Atapta tapas means austerities which have not been practiced. Austerities which have not been practiced is like a meal that hasn't been cooked. Right? A meal that hasn't been cooked doesn't exist. Austerities that haven't been practiced don't exist. So he says, Atapta tapasaha, for one who has not engaged in the practice of tapas, naprapnuvanti mahatsukam. Such a person does not gain great happiness. So let's have a brief discussion about tapas, about the importance of tapas in spiritual life, and why Vyasa is starting off on this. Can you imagine? Vyasa hasn't seen them for years, and this is the first thing he says to them. He sees them suffering. Really, get the context. He sees them suffering, and what is his message? Without suffering, there's no great gain in life. So he's not consoling them exactly. He's actually telling them, you better be ready to withstand this tapas. Like they say in American English, no pain, no gain. And that's basically his message, which is not a very warm and cuddly message. But this, again, Vyasa is no ordinary grandfather. And let's be honest, these are no ordinary grandchildren. So in this context, he starts talking about tapas. You may not know, and you should know, that the word tapas comes from the dhatu tap, which is to heat. And one of the many meanings for tapas is literally heat. Tapas means heat. In fact, the most direct meaning of tapas is heat. Then how does tapas come to mean spiritual austerities? Austerities like fasting. By the way, what are they doing in the forest, living on non-existent fruits and roots? They're doing a lot of fasting. So, what is the connection then between spiritual austerities like fasting? What is the connection to heat? Heat, go back to the kitchen metaphor, heat cooks things. In fact, the word tapta means heated or cooked. Atapta tapasaha can mean, if you want to translate it very loosely, one who has not been cooked by tapas. And it's so significant, this sense of being cooked, being prepared. When you're in a kitchen cooking, what are you doing? I mean, cooking means what? Can you cook without heat? Suppose you had to prepare a meal with no heat, with no oven, with no flame, with no fire. How could you? You have some raw rice? You have some potatoes? What will you do without heat? Without heat, that potato can't be eaten, the rice can't be eaten, and that then becomes a metaphor for a life of spiritual growth. And the way it works, many of you have heard me talk about this before, just like a potato is prepared for eating by heating the potato, in the same way a person is prepared for spiritual growth through the practices we call tapas. So tapas, meaning heat, refers to all of those preparatory practices that prepare you for a life of spiritual growth. And if that tapas hasn't gone on, if you haven't cooked that potato thoroughly, and how delightful our American expression when you say someone is half-baked is a perfect expression. Half-baked means what? Like the potato. It's not ready. It hasn't been cooked sufficiently. In the same way, atapta tapasaha, oh my gosh, you could actually translate it that as for someone who's half-baked. Honestly, it works. Atapta tapasaha, for one who has not adequately practiced tapas. That's the literal meaning. Atapta tapasaha, for one who has not adequately practiced tapas, means what? For one who is half-baked. So such a person, naprapnuvanti mahatsukam, that person will not gain great happiness. Now you might say, what is the connection between doing tapas and gaining great happiness. There are two connections. One we're talking about, and that is, if you define Mahat Sukham, great happiness, as moksha, without tapas, without a life of preparation, without adhikaritvam, you know that term, preparation, without adhikaritvam, there's no hope of gaining moksha, of gaining liberation. So if Mahat Sukham is understood in that loftiest sense of moksha, then without tapas, forget it, there's no possibility of getting that Mahat Sukham. But you could take Mahat Sukham just in a more general sense, great happiness. So he's saying, without undergoing tapas, you cannot enjoy great happiness. This can be understood as, in the second sense, a reference to the law of karma. And here's how it works. You and I and everyone, we've been born with a mixture of good and bad karmas. And usually in life, we find ourselves we find those good and bad karmas fructifying at more or less the same rate. So suppose you're born with, if you allow me just to put some numbers on just for the sake of discussion. Suppose you're born with 100 punya karmas and 100 papa karmas from past lives. I'm just making this up just to give you an idea. By now, you have exhausted at least 50 of the good karmas and 50 of the bad karmas. Which means, what's ahead for you? 50 good karmas, that's good. But 50 papa karmas are waiting to fructify. Waiting, watch out. Now here's the idea. Suppose you undergo tapas. To willfully undergo tapas means to willfully experience suffering. Whenever you suffer, you are actually fructifying those papa karmas. This is the doctrine of karma that says the fructification of good karmas brings happiness to you. The fructification of bad karmas brings suffering to you. And then by extension, any happiness you have is due to the fructification of good karmas. Any suffering you undergo is due to the fructification of the so-called bad karmas, papa karmas. So therefore, when you undergo suffering, you are exhausting your papa karmas. You with me? Every time you suffer, you are exhausting papa karmas. One of Puja Swamiji's favorite jokes was, every time you get bit by a mosquito, another papa karma is gone. That was good. Another mosquito bite, another papa karma gone. That was the way he taught that. So, in this context then, if you willfully undergo tapas as a spiritual practice, you are willfully undergoing suffering and thereby helping to exhaust those papa karmas. So, if at this point in your life, if you have 50 punya karmas and 50 papa karmas waiting for you, and then you willfully undergo some suffering performing tapas, what you do is you exhaust some of those 50 papa karmas, which means looking forward, you have fewer papa karmas to encounter in the remainder of your life. You are exhausting papa karmas through tapas. So this is the twofold purpose of tapasya, of undergoing spiritual austerity. The primary purpose is preparation. Preparation for a life of spiritual growth. The secondary reason, also referred to in this verse, is you exhaust papa karmas, thereby ensuring that whatever life remains will have fewer papa karmas fructifying and more punya karmas. So having said that, then Vyasa goes on to extol the virtues of tapas. tapaso hi param nasti, tapaso hi param, tapasa vindate mahata, tapasa vindate, na sadhyam tapasa kinchata, na sadhyam tapasa kin, iti buddhyasva bharata, iti buddhyasva bharata. He indeed param nasti tapasaha. Tapasaha, than tapas. Param nasti. There is nothing better than tapas. There's nothing superior to tapas, nothing better than tapas. Tapasa vindate mahata. Tapasa, through the performance of tapas, spiritual austerity, vindate, one obtains. One obtains what? Mahat, that which is great, that which is wonderful. Na asadhyam kinchit tapasaha. Tapasaha, for one who is performing tapas, na kinchit asadhyam. Nothing is impossible to accomplish. Now, if you're thinking, wait, if I do enough, literally he says, for one who does tapas, nothing is impossible to accomplish. So you're thinking, if I do enough tapas, can I be elected president of this country? He says, na sadhyam kinchit tapasaha. Well, these are verses of stuti, of praise, and this is a style known as hyperbole. Hyperbole means intentional exaggeration, so don't take it literally. If you want to be president of the country, all you have to do is enough fasting and tapas. I don't think so. So, intentional exaggeration. It's a poetic style. Don't take it too literally. Iti buddhyasva bharata. Bharata, O great one, addressing Yudhishthira. O Yudhishthira, iti buddhyasva. Thus should you understand. O Yudhishthira, please understand the glory, the power, the greatness of tapas. And of course, Yudhishthira has understood. But even though he's understood, there's something remarkable about Yudhishthira. He always has questions. Yudhishthira is always asking questions, always. No matter what you tell him, he'll have some questions. Why? He always wants to learn more. And especially in this subject matter, here Vyasa is talking to his grandson about dharma. Tapas is part of a life of dharma. And dharma happens to be Yudhishthira's favorite topic. After all, he's called Dharma Raja, one of his names. Dharma Raja, the king of dharma. He's also Dharma Putra, your Yamaputra. Remember, his father was actually Yama, who was understood as a god of dharma. And Yudhishthira, by nature, is focused on dharma. His whole life is focused on dharma. And he came to be so dharmic. How? By always thinking about dharma and always asking about dharma. So now he sees an opportunity to ask some questions and learn even more about dharma. So he asks, Yudhishthira vacha, Yudhishthira Bhagavan dana dharmanam, Bhagavan dana tapasova mahamune, tapasova Kim swat bahugunam pretya, kim swat bahugunam, kim va dushkaramuchyate, kim va dushkaramuchyate. Bhagavan, O Lord, Mahamune, O great sage, he addresses his grandfather Vyasa. He says, Dana dharmanam tapasahava Kinswat bahugunam. Kinswat, which? Bahugunam. Which is more beneficial? Bahugunam. Kinswat bahugunam. Which is more beneficial? Which is more beneficial? Tapasaha? Is tapas more beneficial? or dana dharmanam, or the practice of dana. Dana means charity. So his question here, is tapas more beneficial? Or, va means or dana dharmanam, or is a practice of charity more bahugunam, more beneficial, pretya, at the time of death? Not only, he's thinking not only about accumulation of punya karma for the next life, but even in this life, kim va, or also, dushkaram va uchyate. Which of them, kim swat, which of them is dushkaram, more difficult to perform? So he's looking through the lens of this life, comparing tapas, spiritual austerity, and dana, charity. He's asking which of these two is more difficult to perform in this life, and which of these two will be bahugunam, will be more beneficial, pretya, having died, which means for the next life. Now, we have to kind of get inside Yudhishthira's head and understand why is he asking this particular question. Vyasa has just told him about the importance of tapas, and then he brings in dana. Why does he bring in dana? Well, look at this. In the forest where they've been for 11 years, can Yudhishthira and his brothers, can they practice tapas? In fact, that's about all they can do, is practice tapas in that forest. But tell me, in that forest, can they practice dana? They can't practice dana. Dana means you have to give, and if you have nothing to give, you can't practice dana. On the other hand, 11 years ago, they had an entire kingdom and practiced tremendous dana. 11 years ago, before they lost that third dice game and got kicked out, they gave so much charity to everyone in their kingdom. They were accustomed to practicing dana, but now for the last 11 years, Yudhishthira and his brothers have been unable to practice dana at all. So it's weighing on his mind. He's saying, shouldn't I be practicing dana? And how can I practice dana here in the forest? He's frustrated about not being able to practice dana. Of course, after they win the war and regain their kingdom, they'll be able to practice dana again. But this should help you understand, why does he ask about dana? Vyasa didn't mention it. Why did Yudhishthira bring up dana? For this reason. They used to practice a lot of dana, but now living in the forest, they're unable to practice dana. So therefore Yudhishthira asks, which is better? Which is more effective and which is more difficult to practice, tapas or dana? And Vyasa seizes on that last question, which is more difficult? And Vyasa addresses that. Vyasavacha, Danana dushkarataram, Danana dushkar, Prativyamasti kinchana, Prativyamasti, Tasya duhkarji tasyaivam, Tasya duhkarjitam, Parityaga sudushkaram, Parityaga sudushkaram. So Vyasa replies to that question, which is more difficult to practice? And he says, Danat na dushkarataram. He said, there is nothing dushkarataram, nothing more difficult to practice danat than dana. Danat becomes danan due to grammar rules. Prativyam asti kinchana. Prativyam, here in this world, na asti kinchit, there is nothing. Na asti kinchit, there is nothing here. Dushkarataram, more difficult to practice, danat, than danam. Why? He explains. Tasya dukarjitasya evam parityagaha sudushkaraha. He says, parityagaha. So what is dana? Dana is giving something up. Dana is, you have to give. So dana is parityagaha, giving something up. The parityaga tasya, of something, you give up something. You give up something that is dukkha arjita. You give up something that is acquired with difficulty. So this, by the way, that also gives you some insight into how Vyasa understands dana. He says dana is the parityaga, charity, is the parityaga, the giving. Literally the abandonment, but it means giving. It means the giving or giving up of something which has been acquired. He says, dukkha arjitasya, dukkha arjita, that which has been collected with difficulty. Look at his definition. Charity is to give up something that you acquired with difficulty. What is the message? The message is, if you're an extraordinarily wealthy person and you give in charity a little bit, that little bit, is there any difficulty associated with that, giving that little bit? There's no difficulty associated. If you're a wealthy person and you give $100, what is the difficulty associated with your earning that $100? No difficulty whatsoever. So if you're a wealthy person giving $100 in charity, according to Vyasa, that's not charity at all. He says it's only charity when you give away something that was acquired with difficulty. By the way, that's kind of the theme of this chapter. Dukkha arjita. Arjita means collected or acquired. Dukkha means with difficulty. So if you think about somebody who's not wealthy, who has to work hard at a job where they're getting paid $10 an hour, for that person to give $100, $100 means what? Not 10 hours of work. Remember, even that person pays taxes. So it means they had to work 15 hours or something to earn that $100 which they're giving in charity. That is dukkha arjita. That is acquired with difficulty. Therefore, that is dana. That is charity, not anything else. So he says, tasya dukkha arjitasya parityagaha. The dana, charity, which is giving away something you've acquired with difficulty. He says that is, the expression used at the first quarter was dushkara, difficult. Notice the last word is su-dushkara. Dushkara is difficult. Su-dushkara means really difficult. So it is, that parityagaha is su-dushkaraha. It is really difficult. Now, what is the point he's making? To giving up something that is acquired with difficulty, and remember the context is comparing it to tapas. And here's a nice observation. When you do tapas, you suffer. How many times do you suffer? If you fast one day, you suffer for one day. Now, what is the point he's making here? Tapas, you suffer once. His point here then is dana, you suffer twice. How do you suffer twice? First you suffer when you acquire the money, then you suffer when you give it away. Twice. There's suffering involved in the acquisition of whatever you're giving away, and there's also loss, suffering when you give it away. So tapas involves suffering once, dana involves suffering twice. Therefore he says that dana, that charity, is sudushkaraha, that is exceedingly difficult. And then he talks further about dana. Patre danam swalpamapi, patre danam kale dattam yudhishtara, kale dattam manasa suvishuddhena, manasa suvishuddhena, pretyanantapalam smritam, pretyanantapalam smritam. Talking about tapas, look at the last line. He says, Pretya anantapalam smritam. Remember, Yudhishthira's question was twofold. Which is more difficult to practice? So he's already said, what is more difficult to practice? Dana. Why is it more difficult to practice than tapas? In tapas, you suffer once. In dana, you suffer twice. Now here, the other part of Yudhishthira's question is, which is more beneficial in gaining punya karma to bless you in your next life? Pretya in the last line. So pretya means having died, going on to the next life. He says, ananta palam smritam. It is understood, smritam, it is remembered, means it is understood, that dana is understood to have ananta palam. Limitless benefit, limitless fruits. And again, don't take it literally. This is more hyperbole, more deliberate exaggeration. No karma has ananta palam. No finite action has infinite results. So if he uses a word like ananta, which means infinite results, then it's hyperbole, it's intentional exaggeration. Okay, so he's saying that dana is more beneficial than tapas, but now he gives some restrictions. He's already given one restriction in a prior verse. What was that? Charity is only charity if what you are giving is something acquired with difficulty. That is charity. By the way, that means when you do your spring house cleaning and you've got a bunch of old stuff that you don't need anymore, and you call these fellows who come in a truck, Goodwill or someone, and they pick this all up and they carry it away, which is a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do. But according to Vyasa, that is not... Well, actually it could be charity, because if you had to work really hard to acquire all that stuff, I suppose it could be charity. But if it's just a bunch of old useless stuff and you just want to clean out your house, it's debatable if Vyasa would consider that really to be charity. Anyway, so he says, though, that for that dana, that charity, to have ananta palam, to have tremendous, instead of saying limitless fruits, how about tremendous benefit? So in order for that dana to have tremendous benefit, it should not only should it be giving of what you've acquired with some difficulty, but it has three more conditions. He says here, it should, that dana, go to the top, that danam, that charity, swalpamapi, even if it's a little bit, but again, a little bit of something acquired with difficulty, so even if it's little, if it's acquired by difficulty, and, here comes the first condition, if it is given patre, unto a person who is deserving, unto a deserving person. Secondly, kale dattam. If it is dattam given kale at an appropriate time, if it is given to a deserving person, so which means if you donate money, this is a stark example. There are people who send money to terrorist organizations in the Middle East. You know that. Is that charity? So it's not given to patre, it's not given to a deserving person. Kale, at the right time. So if somebody is struggling and struggling and struggling, then finally they get a job, and then you give some help. Too late. They needed help before. So that charity has to be given at the right time. And Yudhishthira. And a third qualification, manasa su vishuddhena. And if it is given with a pure mind, given with a pure heart. These conditions are given. Does that sound a little familiar? Patre kale cha. So some of you remember when we studied Bhagavad Gita in 17th chapter, Sri Krishna talks about three kinds of dana: sattvika dana, rajasa dana, and tamasa dana. And if you've forgotten, it's quite relevant. You see those verses really quickly. He says, "Datavyamiti adanam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha." There you have it. Kale cha patre cha tadanam satvikam smritam. What is satvika danam? It is dana that is given deshe, in the right place, kale, at the right time, patre, to a deserving person. It is given other things, he says. Sri Krishna adds a little bit more here. Anupakarani, it is given without expecting to get anything in return. And it is given with the attitude datavyam. This is to be done. I should give this. I'm not expecting anything in return. Giving it to the right person at the right time and place. That's sattvika dana, charity, as opposed to rajasa dana. Yattu pratyupakarartam palamuddishya va punaha diyate cha pariklishtam taddanam rajasam smritam. What is rajasa danam? He says, that which is given pratyupakarartam, for the sake of getting something in return. This is a common problem in politics. They use the expression pay to play in politics, right? In fact, I think some of you know that Governor Christie's old buddies are in court now for exactly these problems. It's a common problem in politics. If you want a politician to help you, what do? You give to the politician so that they'll help you. Is that charity? So that is upakarartam, that is something given for the sake of getting something in return. Pariklishtam va, or if it's given with regret. If you kind of give it, I shouldn't give this, I don't feel good about giving this, but here, take it. That is pariklishtam, that which is given with regret, that is rajasadana. And then finally, tamasadana. Adesha kale yadanam apatre byaschadiyate asatkritam avagnatam tatamasamudahritam. What is tamasadana? It is given adesha kale, at the wrong time and place, apatre, to the wrong person, and it is given asatkritam avagnatam. It is given disrespectfully. So those are examples of tamasa dana. Just to reflect on what we saw not long ago when we studied chapter 17. All right. So that's echoed in this verse where Vyasa says that there are tremendous benefits to be gained through dana, charity, but only if it's done properly. That's sattvika dana. Now, having finished his sales pitch on, funny to call it a sales pitch, he's teaching dana, the importance of charity. Now he wants to give a story to illustrate the importance of dana, charity, but in this context, in the context of tapas. So he's going to give the story of Mudgala. And Mudgala is the perfect story because it simultaneously illustrates the importance of dana and tapas. It's not either or, it's both and. Dana and tapas, and we'll see that as we see the story. We'll start the story and see how far we get. Atrapyudaharanti mam atrapyudaharan itihasam puratanam itihasam vrihitrona parityagad vrihitrona parit yatpalam prapa mudgalaha yatpalam prapa mudgalaha. So here comes the story of the Rishi Mudgalaha. Atra, in this context, talking about tapas and dana, api, also, udaharanti imam. Imam itihasam, this story, puratanam, this old story, itihasam puratanam, this old story, udaharanti, is a good example. There is this old story about Mudgala, which is a good example, and a good example about Mudgala in that last line, who yat palam prapa. Mudgala prapa, he obtained yat palam, which fruits, which benefit. Now that word yat, for our Sanskrit students, a relative pronoun which connects to nothing in this verse. It connects to the prior verse, ananta palam. So in the prior verse, Vyasa was talking about tremendous fruits that can be obtained, tremendous benefits, blessings, blessings that can be obtained through dana. And he says in this verse that yat palam, those tremendous blessings, prapa, were obtained. Who obtained them? Mudgala, the Rishi Mudgala. How did Mudgala attain that? Vrihi drona parityagat. We saw that word parityaga in a prior verse, giving up. Dana is giving up. By the way, sannyasa then is giving up. It's in fact, dana, charity, can be considered a form of sannyasa. An element of sannyasa. If you have respect for sannyasa at all, whenever you give charity, that's an expression of sannyasa. It is parityaga. It is giving something up. So what did Mudgala give up? Parityaga, he gained tremendous blessings. Parityaga, through giving up what? Vrihi drona. Vrihi means grain. Kind of specifically it means rice, but it can mean other grains as well. Drona has several meanings. Here, drona is a measuring cup. So Mudgala gave up vrihi drona. He gave up a measuring cup worth of rice. And it was a small measuring cup. I don't know, like a cup. A cup of rice. A cup of rice? Is giving up a cup of rice a big deal? It was for Mudgala, and we're going to find out why. So Mudgala, by giving up a cup of rice, or whatever grain it was, he received tremendous blessings through that act of dana. How is that so? He begins the story. Shilhon chavrit dharmatma shilon chavritir dhar Mudgala samshata vrataha Mudgala samshata asitrajan kurukshetre asitrajan kuru satyavagana suyakaha satyavagana. So who is this Mudgala? Mudgala was, end of the first line, dharmatma. An extremely righteous person is dharmatma. And he was samshita vrataha. He was one whose vratas, whose vows were samshita, absolutely firm. He was absolutely firm in his vows and in a particular vow of tapas. A particular vow of tapas, which is called Shila Uncha Vrittihi. Shila Uncha becomes Shiloncha, following grammatical rules. Shiloncha Vritti. Vritti here means a lifestyle. So Shiloncha Vrittihi, this lifestyle of Shila and Uncha, was his vrata, his tapas. Now what do these words mean? Both the words Shila and Uncha both refer to the same practice. The practice, the simple word for it is gleaning. Gleaning means what? After the farmers have collected all the grain from the fields, it's possible they've left a little bit behind. Maybe a little bit here, just if something falls to the ground, a little bit here, a little bit there. They've harvested the field. Whatever grain remains behind after the harvest is available to be gleaned. So someone who lives on grains gleaned from fields that are already harvested, that person is shiloncha vrittihi. That person lives a life supported by gleaning, and Mudgala lived that kind of life. A very appropriate metaphor, because how much grain is left in those fields after it's been harvested? The farmers are pretty particular about getting everything they can out of that field, so you can be sure that there's very, very little that remains. And it's a perfect metaphor, because what is the situation of the Pandavas? They're living in the forest where there is very, very little available. And the comparison here is given to Mudgala, who's living on the very sparse grains left behind in the fields. So both the Pandavas and Mudgala are living an extremely difficult life with very, very little. Very little food to eat means not enough food to eat. The Pandavas were emaciated, and you can be sure Mudgala was emaciated as well. Let's just see the beginning of the story in the next verse, and we'll wrap up there. Tam tu shushrava dharmishtam, tam tu sushrava dhar. Mudgalam samshita vratam, Mudgalam samshita vratam, Durvasa nripa digvasas, Durvasa nripa digvas, Tamatha bhyajagamaha, Tamatha bhyajagamacha, Tam sushrava dharmishtam, Mudgalam samshita vratam. So we'll see the verse in the next class. I'll just paraphrase it for you. Someone heard about this pious rishi, Mudgala, living on the gleanings of these fields, learning about this extraordinary rishi, this rishi engaged in such severe tapas penance, and this person heard about Mudgala and was curious to go and meet him. And who is that? Durvasa, who is one of the strangest characters you will meet with in Hindu scripture. And when we meet next time, we'll see the story of Durvasa and the relationship between Mudgala and Durvasa, and then Vyasa will use that to teach the value of dana and tapas. We'll see that when we meet next time. All right, a couple of closing announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our class for teenagers is resuming. It's been on hiatus over the summer months. If you have a teen, or if you know of a family who has a teen, we have it's really a high quality class for the teens. Invite them to come tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I mentioned before that Vasanti has returned from India. She's resuming her mindful meditations. This year she's doing something she calls mindful movement and meditation. So similar to her mindful awareness meditations, but incorporating more work with slow yogic bodily movements and a lot of mindful meditation applied to that movement. So you can come for that class. It'll meet every Sunday at 5 p.m. starting tomorrow. And then after the mindful movement and meditation, then I'll conduct a question-answer satsang session afterwards. Two things to request of you. One is we would like to, in the future, after these Saturday morning programs, we won't be having many gardening projects with the winter coming, but if some of you are able to stay back and help just clean up a little bit and straighten up a little bit, it would be really, really helpful if a few of you could stay back. If you would like to do that, could you see Vasanti and volunteer? And so some light straightening up and cleaning up, that'll be done immediately after Saturday classes. And another place we could use some help, if you're interested, is on first and third Sunday, we have a program for children. During our children's program, we break them up into two groups. And the younger group, which is 7 and below, we teach, what can you do with 7-year-olds? You teach them stories. So it's a story time, Hindu stories from Puranas, etc., for children 7 and below. If you're interested, we could use more teachers to help with that. We like to rotate some teachers. So if you would like to help by telling some stories to children on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock, you can also talk to Vasanti, let her know that you'd be available. Library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.